What's good to y'all? John Broadway here, coming to y'all live and direct from my house here in LA. Talking to y'all today about several reasons why we should be hopeful in this time. Remain hopeful in this time. And I do want to preface this by saying that, I do understand a lot of the pain that's going on right now. When I had time to fully process what happened to George Floyd, it definitely brought me to tears. And that in conjunction with, what's been happening in this country to people of color for hundreds of years. But despite all of this, I know there's this consensus feeling, especially among people who are around for the 60s and the riots in the 90s and Ferguson, obviously, that there isn't any progress or change. But I'm here to talk about the 7 things that I'm noticing that give me hope for real progress and change. So first one, that number 1, racism is actually being acknowledged now. That was always the biggest cry that we had coming from the Black communities. We need to acknowledge it before we can make real change. It has to be a fundamental acknowledgement. And I think if you look at what our leaders are saying across the world, Donald Trump notwithstanding, there is a general consensus that, okay, we're acknowledging it now, and that's creating a foundation for us to actually make change, because it's being acknowledged. And on top of that too, there's this seeking of knowledge to understand it, which comes from the acknowledgement of it, right? I've seen so many people post things about where people can go to get more informed on the issue, and creating a fundamental understanding on something based off an acknowledgement is the foundation of real change. And so I want you guys to be aware of this happening and glean hope in it. Number 2 is Black people have the floor right now in the country, in the world. There is a general consensus that people want to hear us speak. They finally want to hear us actually speak about this and how we're feeling, and to express our thoughts and emotions on this issue. And we have the floor. We are being listened to right now. And with this attention, with this time, we can use it in order to keep our fight going forward, and to make real change. And number 3, as I mentioned earlier, the world is joining on this. When we saw, the riots in the 1990s in Ferguson, it wasn't a worldwide event. We've seen demonstrations in like Paris, London, all over the world, right? Everyone is aware of what's going on in the world right now. Everyone in the world is aware of what's going on right here in America, and that is huge. I don't think people should take that for granted. There is no way that we have the whole eyes of the world on us right now, and we're not going to create some sort of change. Be very, very aware of that in the moment that speaks to, or how that speaks to this moment. The eyes of the world are on us, and we're going to respond. And number 4, another reason why I have hope is just the amount of allies we've seen, particularly white allies, right? When I go to these protests, it's not even majority Black. Maybe it's probably not even half Black. The majority of people there are people who aren't of color, white people, or maybe people of color like Mexicans and Asians. But there is so much allyship right now from people who aren't of color, and that is meaningful. That's not something we saw as much in previous instances of these police brutality instances, right? This is the first time I feel like where there's a 99.9% consensus that what happened with George Floyd was wrong, and that we should do something to keep these things from happening. It's powerful. And then number 5, another reason I have hope is how many companies are getting involved. My emails are being flooded with companies overtly acknowledging the moment and the systemic injustice and racism and police brutality that has brought us here. Ben and Jerry's, just, great example. If you want to look at a company who's taken a stand, look at their Instagram. They just posted something today that said, "We must dismantle white supremacy." So bold, coming from a company owned by, to my understanding, people who are in color. And it's just indicative of this general consensus of support that we're getting, not just from maybe political leaders, or not just people at protests and stuff, but business leaders are realizing that they have to get involved in this. They have to speak to this, and they understand the moment, and that speaks to some real progress and change happening. Number 6, silence is complicity is a dominant narrative, which kind of touches on my point from before. I think when you see people in business taking a stand, like realize how important this is. Business people are very reluctant to get involved in certain touchy matters because it's business. They have to protect their image, they have to protect their money. But the narrative of silence is complicity is so dominant that these CEOs can't not speak about it. They cannot send these emails to people saying that, hey, we hear you, we're with you, we stand in support with you. We're going to put our money and our dollars behind making making real change happen. That is something that we should all be aware of right now, and appreciate that there is a general understanding that you cannot not speak up about this. That speaks to a real movement going on right now. It's happening. And lastly, number 7, this is kind of, so I don't know if you guys heard about what happened with Drew Brees, but it's a particular instance that I see that shows actual change. And so what happened with Drew Brees is he was being interviewed and asked if we will see more protests or more people kneeling in the NFL to protest police brutality and racism, as Colin Kaepernick did in 2016-17. And his response was directly like, no, I will never be a part of that, and I will never support anyone who disrespects the flag. And he went on to talk about how the national anthem and the flag makes him think about his father or his grandfather and the fight that he put in for the Korean War or whatever. His answer was completely ignoring the other perspectives that are going into this issue, right? And the actual cause of the protest, and completely just hijacked it and just only spoke from his point of view, right? And before, that was okay. In 2016, 2017, at the height of this issue, people were doing that and it was fine. Everybody could just divert the real issue of the protest and say it was about this, and that was okay. But when Drew Brees said that, he faced so much backlash from all different sides. And he was forced to submit an apology about that and admit his support for these protests. And so that, to me, is a tangible piece of progress that we're making. That it's no longer okay to ignore this issue. It's no longer okay. You can't do it. If you do, you're going to be dragged through the mud for it until you apologize. So taking all these things into account, I see so much hope for real progress and change. And I know that there's still a lot of ugliness going on right now. There's still a long way to go, but we have to recognize the beauty that exists in the world so that we can remain energized and happy about that and continue to fight going. So to all of you out there, make sure that you continue to see the good that exists out there and use that to keep going, keep fighting. So I appreciate you guys checking the video out. If you like any of this content, you feel it's valuable, please like, share, subscribe, all that good YouTube stuff. Make sure other people are hearing this hopeful message and getting this positive energy. So see you next time.